Okay, so the Full Blind Motorsports kit is fitted up. It definitely has not fitted up well out of the box. It's been nothing but a pain in the butt, having to modify the pipework and the exhaust. Yeah, and they also didn't supply any way of coming up with a means of lubricating the turbo. Normally they'd have a little banjo bolt coming out of the head here. That wasn't supplied, so I emailed them and they said just tap the clutch cover, and kind of just left it at that and never wrote back to me. So yeah, we'll have to come up with something a little bit different, but I mean, it looks kind of cool. I'm not entirely happy with it. It could look a lot better. I think it's a little bit clumsy, but we'll see what we come up with in the coming days. Alright, so we're going to do the first step of the Kitaco oil cover so that I've got a suitable way of getting some oil to this turbocharger to see how it's going to run. So the first step we're going to do is to drain our oil out. It's a bit hard to see, but it's let me get this one right. So it's just here. I'm going to loosen that guy off and drain the oil out. It's going to be our first step. Also going to work our way around. I think these are M8s. It's coming around here. We'll have to disconnect our clutch lever. Yeah. So let's see what Kitaco have sent me. So it looks like we've got our oil bungs or banjos. That looks like what we're going to put over our oil spinner. They've even marked a few little markings on there for us to make life easy. Grip glue. Looks like we've got some instructions. I'll give a close up for that in a second. I've got a gasket over here as well. And then here's our actual cover. A couple of stickers. Alright, so before we get started, I'm just going to check out that everything that I've got's meant to be here. I'll also pull out this where the oil filter is going to go. So this is where our dipstick's going to come through here, and then over here is where we're going to have to replace the clutch lever. So we're going to take that from the existing cover, and we'll also put a drop of oil in those bearings while we're here, just to make sure that they don't end up being dry at any point. So everything will get a little bit of oil on it. So here's I'll just make this a bit easier for you guys to read. So if you do get one of these that's doesn't come with instructions, here's some instructions for you. Just, you know, freeze the video, take a screenshot of it. I mean, I haven't gone through this yet, obviously, because we just pulled it out, but it looks like it's pretty useful. You know, we've got numbered instructions and some pictures at least anyway, which is better than what I've had for some other kits that I've had for some other bikes. So let's go and get back to the bike and get into it. So we're back over here on the clutch cover side of the bike. I've put in the bung just loosely after draining all the oil out of the engine. So at this point in time, make sure that you don't start your engine because there's no oil in it. I'd recommend taking your key out and maybe just putting it somewhere not in the barrel. Just leave your bars unlocked so you can move the bike around to get access to stuff if you need to. But yeah, definitely don't go starting it. So these are all little M6s. I think there's 10 of them all up. So we'll see how I have to go getting around the right side rear set here just to get it off. I've also got to get rid of these little bump bars as well, but we'll work that out on the way as we go. So first thing we're going to do, so we drain the oil. Next thing we're going to do is just take this clutch lever off and then we're going to loosen all of these little M6 by 40 bolts and give it a little wiggle and bring it off from there. Okay, so a little update on getting this clutch cover off. So we've got the 10 M6 to there, an 8mm head, by the way, for an 8mm socket. You can see here I've just loosened off this rear set. I've taken the exhaust off that was here before. This is a 12mm socket to undo that. And then this is a 3/4 inch nut. I've just backed it off just so I can loosen it to get into this one here. Otherwise it's super tough to try and get in there. I also, you can see here, backed off the clutch lever. So this nut is pretty close to where it is, other than I just moved it then. So I backed this off so I could extend out that clutch lever. And that lets you disconnect it quite easily. And it also gives me a reference from where I can tension it up to, because I liked where the clutch was before I've been mucking with everything. So I've gone ahead and I've undone this in a general crisscross pattern just to try and keep it balanced as we bring it off. But yeah, for the 5 minutes, definitely loosen this off. Okay, so the clutch cover's off. I gave it a very gentle smack with a rubber mallet just down in here, just to make it break the suction onto the gasket, and it just slid right off. Super, super easy. And now I'll fidget around to get that off. So we should have some dowel pins still in here, which we do. So the gasket still looks pretty good. There isn't any left really on the main assembly here. But what we're looking at now is a clutch. So I'm happy with my clutch. I'm not touching that today. We're going to get rid of this oil spinner. It's part of the process to remove this. And you can see here, I've earlier, back in the day, put in a bigger Kitaco larger fuel pump. I should have just ordered the cover when I did that, but that's it was just silly of me anyway in the hindsight. But it looks pretty clean in here, really. I don't see too much debris or anything like that. The oil looks pretty clean. So let's get going on getting rid of this oil spinner. So the next step we got here is to remove the oil spinner. While we're here, just going to pull out a little gauze wedge here. So you can see it's a little bit gunky, but we'll clean that up before we put it back in. So I don't have a gear holder to hold the oil spinner. So what I've done is I've put it into gear. And you'll see that when I try and rotate this anti-clockwise, I've already loosened it, so it's not doing what it was doing before. When I was loosening anti-clockwise, it would just keep turning. So I put on a 10mm the other direction, so I could pull these in opposite directions like that to let me loosen each of these as I've gone around. So then I've cracked all three of them now, and now the gear itself is enough resistance that I can start to remove this oil spinner cover. So I'm going to leave it in gear just so that I've got some resistance here while I tighten this up. So again, because I don't have a gear lock here to undo the oil spinner nut, you have to order one of these special tools. They're pretty cheap. You can get them off Amazon. And yeah, you've got your 1/2 inch drive. So that fits on there, but then you run into the same trouble that the oil spinner won't run. Oh, sorry, that the oil spinner rotates, even though I've got the bike in gear. So I reinstalled the 10mm oil spinner cap nut here, and then I've used that just to brace it against to get an anti-clockwise torque onto this oil spinner nut. So it gets to a point where it's tight, and then I got it up here and then gave it a really good smack with my mallet, and then now you can see it's come loose. So also note that when you do take off that oil spinner cover, there's going to be some oil entrapped in here still, so make sure you got your pan ready. So then there we go, and that's that step out of the way. Okay, so you can see we got the oil spinner off here. So the next step is going to be, we're going to put in the 27mm collar, which takes up the place of where that oil spinner used to be. And then we need to put in a locking washer and then also those, I think they're called an oil pass nut in the instructions. So what I've got here, where did I put that, is the splined collar. So we've got the hex side, which has got the spline inside of it. So I've gone ahead and put a little bit of oil in there and also on here. And the install calls for that the hex side is going to be facing from the outside. So there's the hex side. So we're going to put it in this way. So the hex side's out. So it also makes a note on the instructions that it's a bit tight to install. So I've gone ahead and made myself a small punch. So essentially I've oiled it up, put in a 13mm hole, just so that I can get that over here to punch that onto the spline a bit easier. So then after I do that, the next step is going to be, I've got here a little bevel washer or a locking washer. They've even marked, don't know if you can see that, outside, and that's going to go on over here is the next step that happens with it. So then the last part after I get that on is we've got the oil pass nut. So we can see we've got a hex side here, and we also need to put in this O-ring into this groove. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil in there and then put that O-ring in there, and then that's going to go up and tighten up and make a seal on our shaft, but it's also going to torque down this spacer and this bevel washer. So once I get those in there, the last step will be to torque that nut up to, I think it's 64 Newton meters. So that's going to be the next step. Okay, so next step, I'm going to put some 5W30 engine oil in this bearing. So it'll get the engine oil once it's been reinstalled on the bike, but it's definitely got some oil for now. And then remove the clutch lifter rod to install. So I'm just going to pull this guy out gently. That's all needed. So it just comes out quite easily. And this should pull out. Just like that. So I've got clutch lifter rod, we've got an O-ring here, it's in okay shape. And then this little dowel pin. So the next step will be apply some grease down in this area, just to help it guide through these holes, because it won't get a lot of lube in there. And then reinstall this dowel pin on the new Kitaco cover. So we're back over here at the bike. I've got the dowel here, it's still in the body. There's another dowel in this position here that I've had to put back in. And I put a light bit of oil just to try and help this gasket stick as I locate the crankcase cover or clutch cover back onto the bike. I've also put a little bit of oil on this face of the cover just to help, you know, as I move it around, not tear the gasket. Already had a little bit of a tear at the top, but I think it's going to be okay for now. If it leaks, I'll just keep an eye on it. It is at the top, not the bottom, so it shouldn't get too wet other than whatever pressure's in there. And we'll put it back on. So this guy's torqued up, put a little bit of oil down here, put a little bit of extra oil on those bearings, and we also now have the clutch lever reinstalled here. It's got some oil on it as well, and a little bit of grease down in the insides. So we'll go ahead and put the cover back on, and then they're going to get torqued up to 10 Newton meters. So not a whole lot, just a little bit there. So we don't want to over tighten them and crush anything either. So last bit is to reinstall these to 10 foot-pounds. So doing them up in a diagonal direction. and just working your way around the bike. So up to 10 foot-pounds, and just check them out. Make sure you put the clutch supply or the clutch lever bracket on before you put the nut in as well. So we're just going to reconnect this guy up, and then that's going to take up our clutch. So we'll check that out, before we go and ride it again, just to make sure that this hasn't moved around too much from where it's meant to be. So we can always adjust it later, but that's about where it was when we pulled it off of the bike. So the next thing that we need to do is, I've already taken the cap screws off here, so they're torqued to 10 Newton meters. So I'm going to bring those out. So we see we've got a cap, we've got an oil ring, and the instructions recommend putting a bit of grease on this oil ring, and our filter should come out without too much trouble. So there's a little spring down in there as well to help us out. We've got a new filter here, so I'm just going to go ahead, put a little bit of grease, got some grease just off the film here, run that around. Also just a very light smear around where that sealing rubber is going to be for the filter. And we're going to put that guy back in there and run it back in with the lettering the same way that it should be, that way. And then we're going to torque these up to 10 Newton meters as well. The last thing that we're going to do as well is, remember, the bike has no oil, so it's going to have a different oil level from what the original cover had on it. So they've got a little glass here and a low and high mark. So we're going to stand the bike so that it's vertical or just naturally upright as we ride it. And I'm going to fill it up to the high level mark, just because I'd rather have a bit more than too little. Also, given that this space in here has no oil in it at the moment, that level might come down a bit. As well as also, when I do eventually run these banjo lines up to the turbo to oil it, then I'm going to have a little bit of oil in that part of the system too. So hope you enjoyed the video today. Give it a like, and I should have another video on getting this darn turbocharger from Full Bar Motorsports to work. And if it doesn't, I'm probably just going to modify all this piping, because I think it's a bit ugly and poorly designed. Thanks for watching.